The sound of fiddles and stomping boots echoed through the dusty streets of Winnemucca, Nevada. But Julia Thompson stood alone at the edge of the dance hall, her calloused hands gripping a glass of warm lemonade as she watched couple after couple spin across the worn wooden floor. It was July 1878, and the summer social was in full swing. But at 23 years old, Julia had long stopped expecting any cowboy to ask her to dance. Her hands were too rough from working her father's struggling ranch after he passed 2 years ago. Her dresses were too plain, sewn from whatever fabric she could afford after buying feed and supplies. Her face bore freckles from long days under the Nevada sun, and her figure was lean and muscular rather than soft and delicate, like the other young women who giggled behind their gloved hands. "Shame about the Thompson girl," Julia heard Mrs. Henderson whisper to Mrs. Wallace near the refreshment table. "Works like a man, smells like horses half the time. No wonder she cannot catch a husband." Julia's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes fixed on the dancers. She had heard worse whispers over the past 2 years. After her father died from pneumonia, leaving her alone with 100 acres of scrubland and 30 head of cattle, the town's sympathy had quickly turned to judgment. A woman running a ranch alone was unseemly. She should sell the land, move into town, take up sewing or teaching. But the ranch was all she had left of her father, and Julia would sooner die than give it up. The music swelled, and Julia set down her glass. She had only come to the social because her neighbor, old Mr. Peterson, had insisted she needed to be around people instead of isolating herself on the ranch. But standing here, watching others live the life she would never have, felt worse than any loneliness she experienced among her cattle. She slipped out the back door into the warm night air, breathing in the familiar scent of sage and dust. The stars stretched endlessly overhead, and she could hear the distant sound of the Humboldt River flowing past the edge of town. This was better. Out here, she did not have to pretend she belonged anywhere else. Running away already, Julia spun around to find a tall man leaning against the wall of the dance hall, a cigarette between his fingers. She recognized him vaguely from around town, though she could not place his name. He was probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that brushed his collar and eyes that reflected the lamplight from inside. "I was not running," Julia said defensively. "Just needed air. Sure looked like running to me." He took a drag from his cigarette and studied her. "You are the Thompson woman, are you not? The one with the ranch out past Miller Creek?" "That is correct." Julia lifted her chin. "And you are Marcus Irving. I work at the Triple Bar Ranch, been there about 6 months now." He flicked ash from his cigarette. "Heard about you. They say you run your whole operation by yourself." "They say a lot of things," Julia replied coolly, waiting for the inevitable criticism or unwanted advice about what she should do with her property. But Marcus just nodded slowly. "Must be hard work. That is rough country out there. Your water situation cannot be easy with the drought we have been having." Despite herself, Julia felt her shoulders relax slightly. "Miller Creek is down to a trickle. I have been hauling water from the river 3 times a week just to keep the cattle from dying. That is a full day's work just for watering, plus everything else you have to manage." Marcus stubbed out his cigarette. "How are you managing the branding? Cannot be easy to work alone." It was the first time in months anyone had asked her about the practical realities of her life, rather than lecturing her about propriety. "I have not branded the spring calves yet," Julia admitted. "Been putting it off because I cannot manage it alone, and I cannot afford to hire help." Marcus was quiet for a moment, and Julia immediately regretted her honesty. She did not need charity or pity from a stranger. "I could help," he said finally. "Got Sundays off. Could ride out and help you get through the branding. No charge." Julia's first instinct was to refuse. She had learned not to trust offers that seemed too generous. "Why would you do that?" "Because I know what it is like to be alone and struggling," Marcus said simply. "Lost my own family's farm in Kansas 3 years ago. Grasshoppers destroyed our crops 2 years running, and we could not pay the bank. My parents died that winter, and I came west with nothing but my horse and saddle. If someone had offered to help me back then, it might have made a difference." There was no pity in his voice, just a straightforward statement of fact. Julia studied his face in the dim light, looking for signs of deception or ulterior motives, but saw only honest exhaustion. He looked like what he was, a working cowboy who understood hard times. "All right," she heard herself say. "Sunday then. Come around sunrise if you mean it. I will be there." Marcus tipped his hat to her and walked back toward the front of the building, leaving Julia alone with the stars and the sudden, unfamiliar feeling of hope. Sunday morning dawned clear and hot, and Julia was already working in the corral when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Part of her had not expected Marcus to actually show up, but there he was, riding a sturdy bay horse and leading a second mount. "Figured you might need an extra cutting horse," Marcus called as he dismounted. "Borrowed him from the Triple Bar. Boss said it was fine." Julia wiped sweat from her forehead and nodded toward the cattle gathered in the larger pasture. 30 head total. 23 adults, 7 spring calves that need branding. I have the fire going and irons heating. They worked steadily through the morning, falling into an efficient rhythm. Marcus proved to be an experienced cowhand, and Julia found herself relaxing as they separated calves from their mothers, roped and wrestled each one to the ground for branding. He did not try to take over or tell her how to do things differently. Instead, he followed her lead, asking occasional questions about how she wanted things done on her ranch. By midday, they had finished 5 calves and stopped to rest in the shade of the barn. Julia brought out bread, cheese, and cold well water, and they ate in companionable silence. "You run a tight operation," Marcus said, taking a long drink. "Everything is well maintained considering you are managing alone. Your father taught you well." "He did not have a choice," Julia said. "My mother died when I was 8. It was just the 2 of us after that. He taught me everything: riding, roping, shooting, mending fences, reading the weather. He said the land does not care if you are man or woman, only whether you are willing to work hard enough to earn its respect." Smart man. Marcus leaned back against the barn wall. "Most men cannot see past their own assumptions about what women can or cannot do." "And you can?" Julia asked, hearing the challenge in her own voice. "My mother could outwork any man I ever knew," Marcus said quietly. "Ran our farm while my father was sick, managed every detail, made decisions that kept us going for years longer than we should have survived. I learned early that capability has nothing to do with gender. Just took the world longer to catch up to that truth." They finished the branding by late afternoon. As Marcus prepared to leave, he paused beside his horse. "I could come back next Sunday if you need help with anything else. No charge, like I said, just neighbors helping neighbors." Julia hesitated. Pride warred with practicality. "The north fence line needs repair. Been meaning to get to it for weeks, but it is a 2-person job. North fence it is then." Marcus swung into his saddle. "See you Sunday, Julia." It was the first time he had used her given name, and something about the easy familiarity of it made warmth spread through her chest. She watched him ride away, then turned back to her ranch with energy she had not felt in months. The following Sunday, Marcus arrived with fence posts and wire loaded on a pack horse. They spent the day riding the north boundary, replacing rotten posts and restringing wire. The work was hard and hot, but Marcus kept up a steady stream of conversation that made the hours pass quickly. He told her about growing up in Kansas, about the farm his grandfather had homesteaded, about learning to read from his mother using the only book they owned, a battered copy of Shakespeare's plays. "You read Shakespeare?" Julia asked, surprised. "My mother believed education was the only thing poverty could not take from you," Marcus said, hammering in a post. "She made me memorize passages, said beautiful words make hard lives more bearable. I thought it was nonsense when I was young, but out here, sometimes those words come back to me and make the work feel less lonely." Julia found herself sharing things she had not spoken of in years. Her memories of her mother, her father's slow decline after the pneumonia took hold, her fear that she would lose the ranch despite everything she sacrificed to keep it. Marcus listened without judgment, occasionally offering observations but never advice she had not asked for. As summer progressed into August, their Sunday arrangement became routine. Marcus would arrive at dawn and they would tackle whatever project Julia needed most, repairing the barn roof, clearing brush from the creek bed, sorting cattle. Sometimes they barely spoke, just worked side by side in comfortable silence. Other times, they talked about everything and nothing while their hands stayed busy. The people of Winnemucca noticed. Julia started hearing new whispers when she came to town for supplies. "That Irving boy is at the Thompson place every Sunday," Mrs. Henderson said loudly enough for Julia to hear. "Unseemly, if you ask me. A single man and woman alone like that." "Maybe he is courting her," Mrs. Wallace replied, "though I cannot imagine why. She is hardly a catch." Julia gritted her teeth and paid for her flour and sugar without responding. Let them talk. Their opinions had never fed her cattle or fixed her fences. But that evening, sitting alone on her porch as the sun set over the mountains, Julia found herself wondering if Marcus was courting her. He had never made any romantic overtures, never tried to kiss her or even hold her hand. He treated her like a partner, a friend, someone whose company he enjoyed. It was more than any other man had ever offered her, but it also left her confused about his intentions. The next Sunday, Marcus arrived looking troubled. "Need to talk to you about something," he said without his usual greeting. Julia's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "The Triple Bar is moving cattle up to the summer range in the mountains next week. Whole crew is going, be gone for at least 2 weeks, maybe 3. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I will not be able to come help while I am gone. I am sorry. I know you are counting on me." Relief washed through Julia, followed immediately by surprise at her own reaction. She had been afraid he was going to say he was leaving permanently. "That is fine. I understand. It is your job." "I was thinking, though," Marcus continued, his voice careful, "you should come to the social on Saturday, before I leave. Let me take you dancing." Julia's heart stuttered. "What? I want to dance with you," Marcus said, meeting her eyes directly. "I have wanted to ask since that first night I met you, but I did not want to rush things or make you uncomfortable. But I am leaving for 3 weeks, and I do not want to go without letting you know that I care about you. Not just as a neighbor or friend. I care about you as a woman, Julia." "No man wants to dance with me," Julia said automatically, the words bitter from years of repetition. "I am not pretty or refined. I work like a man. I smell like horses." Marcus stepped closer. "You are the strongest, most capable, most interesting person I have met since coming to Nevada. You are beautiful in ways that matter, in ways that last. And yes, sometimes you smell like horses, but so do I. I work with horses. It would be strange if we smelled like roses." Despite everything, Julia laughed. "That is your romantic declaration, that we both smell like horses." "I am a cowboy, not a poet," Marcus said, but he was smiling. "Dance with me, Julia. Let me show the whole town that I am proud to be seen with you. Let me be the envy of every cowboy in Winnemucca because I get to hold you in my arms." Julia's breath caught. No one had ever wanted to be seen with her, let alone been proud of it. "All right," she whispered. "I will dance with you." Saturday night, Julia stood in front of her mother's old mirror, wearing the one good dress she owned, a deep blue calico she had sewn herself 3 years ago. It was clean and pressed, but hopelessly outdated compared to the fashions the town women wore. Her hands shook as she tried to pin up her hair in something resembling an elegant style, but it kept falling loose. Finally, she gave up and let it hang in a simple braid down her back. Marcus arrived right on time, riding up to her porch in his Sunday clothes. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful." "I look like myself in a clean dress," Julia said, but she felt her cheeks warm. "Exactly." Marcus helped her onto his horse, and they rode toward town together through the gathering dusk. The dance hall was already crowded when they arrived. Conversation stuttered and stopped as Julia walked in with Marcus at her side. She felt the weight of every stare, heard the whispers starting. Her instinct was to flee, but Marcus kept a steady hand at the small of her back, guiding her toward the dance floor. The fiddle player struck up a waltz, and Marcus turned to Julia with a slight bow. "May I have this dance?" Julia placed her hand in his, acutely aware of how rough her palm was, how calloused her fingers. But Marcus did not seem to notice or care. He drew her into the dance with confidence, leading her smoothly across the floor. "I am not very good at this," Julia murmured as she stumbled slightly. "You are doing fine. Just follow my lead." Marcus smiled down at her. "Besides, I have seen you rope a running calf and wrestle a full-grown steer. Dancing is nothing compared to that." Julia relaxed into his arms, letting the music guide her feet. Around them, she could feel the other dancers watching, could imagine what they were saying. But for the first time, she did not care. Marcus was looking at her like she was the only woman in the room, like dancing with her was exactly where he wanted to be. When the waltz ended, Marcus did not release her. Another. They danced 3 more songs, and with each one Julia felt more of her armor falling away. She caught sight of Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Wallace staring with open shock, saw the envious looks from some of the younger cowboys who had never given her a second glance before. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. Finally, they took a break for refreshments. Julia was surprised when several people approached them. Mr. Peterson clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Good to see the Thompson ranch getting some help. Julia's father would have approved of you, son." Even a few of the women offered tentative smiles, though their friendliness felt more like curiosity than genuine warmth. Julia accepted it cautiously, unused to positive attention. As the evening wore on, other men began asking Julia to dance. Cowboys who had ignored her for years suddenly wanted the chance to swing her around the floor, but Julia politely declined each one. "I am here with Marcus," she said simply, and the words felt right in her mouth. She was here with Marcus by choice because she wanted to be. Near midnight, Marcus walked her outside for air. The street was quiet, most of the town focused on the dance inside. They stood together in the darkness, and Julia felt Marcus take her hand. "I meant what I said," he told her. "About caring for you. These past months, working alongside you, getting to know you, have been the best part of my days. I look forward to Sundays all week. When I am gone with the cattle drive, I am going to miss you." "I will miss you too," Julia admitted. "More than I want to." "Why more than you want to?" Marcus asked gently. Julia struggled to find words for the fear coiled in her chest. "Because I am used to being alone. I learned how to survive alone. If I let myself need you, depend on you, and then you leave or change your mind, I do not know if I can go back to being alone again." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was serious. "I cannot promise I will never disappoint you or that life will not throw hard things at us. But I can promise I am not the kind of man who changes his mind about important things. When I commit to something, to someone, I see it through. My parents taught me that. And Julia, I want to commit to you. Not just as a friend or neighbor, but as something more. When I get back from the summer range, I want to court you properly. I want everyone in this town to know my intentions are honorable and serious." Julia's heart hammered against her ribs. "What are your intentions?" "To marry you if you will have me," Marcus said simply. "I know it is too soon to ask that now. We have only known each other a few months, but that is where my heart is heading. I wanted you to know before I left so you can think about it while I am gone. Think about whether you could see a future with me." Julia looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life unexpectedly and changed everything without even trying. "I can see it," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I can see it. I can see us working the ranch together, building something lasting. I can see growing old with you, and that terrifies me because I have never let myself want something this much." Marcus lifted her hand and pressed it to his chest, over his heart. "Then be terrified together with me. Because I have never wanted anything this much either." He kissed her then, soft and tentative, giving her room to pull away if she wanted. But Julia did not pull away. She leaned into him, kissing him back with months of loneliness and longing behind it. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard. "That is something to think about while I am gone," Marcus said with a slight smile. "You are going to be insufferable when you get back," Julia said, but she was smiling too. The 3 weeks Marcus was gone were the longest of Julia's life. She threw herself into ranch work, trying to keep busy, but everything reminded her of him. The north fence they had repaired together, the corral where they had branded calves, the porch where they had shared countless meals and conversations. She was fixing a broken wheel on her wagon when she heard a horse approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Mr. Peterson riding toward her. "Afternoon, Julia," the old man called. "Got a minute to talk, of course." Julia wiped grease from her hands and invited him to sit in the shade. Mr. Peterson was direct as always. "Heard Marcus Irving is courting you. Wanted to make sure his intentions are honorable. Your father was my friend, and I feel responsible for looking out for you." Julia was touched despite herself. "They are. He has been nothing but respectful." "Good." Mr. Peterson nodded. "Because I also came to tell you something. I have been thinking about selling my ranch, getting too old for this work. Was going to sell to the big cattle company that has been buying up land around here. But I would rather sell to you and Marcus if you two are planning to marry and combine operations." Julia's mind raced. The Peterson ranch bordered hers to the east, with better water access and rich grazing land. Combined with her property, it would create a substantial operation. "I do not have money for a purchase like that. I know. That is why I am proposing a different arrangement. You buy my land at a fair price, but I will carry the note. You can pay me in installments over 10 years. By then, with 2 of you working it, you should be able to make it profitable enough to manage the payments and still have a good life." Mr. Peterson's eyes were kind. "Your father would want you to have this opportunity. And I would rather see my ranch go to good people who will care for it than to some corporation that just wants to graze it until nothing is left." "I need to talk to Marcus when he returns," Julia said, her heart pounding with possibility. "Of course. Think it over, talk to your young man and let me know. But do not wait too long. That cattle company is persistent." After Mr. Peterson left, Julia sat on her porch and let herself imagine a different future than the one she had resigned herself to. Not just survival, but real prosperity. Not just a lonely woman scraping by, but a true partnership building something meaningful. When Marcus finally returned, Julia saw him coming from half a mile away. She was working in the garden when the dust cloud on the horizon resolved into a familiar rider. She dropped her hoe and ran toward him without thinking, meeting him as he dismounted in her yard. Marcus caught her up in his arms, spinning her around. "Missed you," he said into her hair. "Missed you too," Julia replied, breathing in the familiar scent of him, dust and horses and sage. They stood holding each other for a long moment before Marcus pulled back to look at her. "I did a lot of thinking up in the mountains. About us, about the future. I know I said I wanted to court you properly, take things slow, but Julia, I do not want to wait. Life is too uncertain out here. Anything can happen. If you are willing, I want to marry you as soon as possible. I want to build a life with you, work this ranch together, wake up next to you every morning. Will you marry me?" Julia laughed, the sound bright with joy. "I have news too. Mr. Peterson wants to sell us his ranch." "Well, sell it to me, but I told him I needed to talk to you first because he is assuming we will marry and work both properties together." Marcus's eyes widened. "That would be incredible. The Peterson place is good land. He is willing to carry the note for 10 years. We would have to work hard, probably harder than we already do, but it could work. We could build something real, Marcus, something lasting. Then let's do it." Marcus took both her hands. "Marry me, Julia, be my wife and my partner in everything." "Yes," Julia said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes to all of it." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Winnemucca. Julia wore a new dress she had sewn for the occasion, cream-colored with lace at the collar that she had splurged on. Marcus wore his Sunday suit and could not stop smiling. The whole town turned out, more out of curiosity than genuine celebration. The woman no man would dance with was marrying one of the most eligible cowboys in the territory. It was too good a story to miss. But as Julia walked down the aisle toward Marcus, she did not care about the whispers or the stares. She cared about the way Marcus looked at her, like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. She cared about the future they were building together, the partnership they were forming. When the Reverend asked Marcus if he took Julia to be his lawfully wedded wife, his voice rang clear. "I do, with my whole heart." And when it was Julia's turn, she met Marcus's eyes and said, "I do," with absolute certainty. At the reception, held at the dance hall, Julia watched the other cowboys watching her. She saw envy in their eyes as Marcus pulled her onto the floor for the first dance as a married couple. She saw them realizing what they had missed, what they had overlooked when they dismissed her as unmarriageable. "They are all wishing they had asked you to dance a long time ago," Marcus murmured in her ear. "Good," Julia said firmly. "Let them regret it. I got exactly who I wanted." The next morning, they began their new life. Marcus moved his few belongings to Julia's ranch, and they rode together to inspect the Peterson property. The old man met them with the deed and papers already drawn up. "Take care of this place," Mr. Peterson said as he handed over the keys to his house. "It was good to me for 40 years. I trust it will be good to you too." Over the following months, Julia and Marcus worked from before dawn until after dusk. They moved the Peterson cattle to better pasture, repaired buildings, cleared irrigation ditches. It was backbreaking work, but doing it together made all the difference. Where Julia had once struggled alone, she now had a true partner who shared both the burden and the rewards. In the evenings, they would collapse onto the porch, too tired to do anything but sit in companionable silence watching the sunset. Marcus would reach for Julia's hand, and they would just hold onto each other, finding comfort in presence rather than words. "Are you happy?" Marcus asked one evening as fall painted the mountains gold and red. "Exhausted," Julia said honestly. "Sore everywhere. Worried about making our loan payment on time, but yes, happier than I have ever been in my life." "Are you?" "More than I thought possible," Marcus replied. "I came west with nothing, expecting nothing, and found everything I needed." The first year of their marriage tested them in ways they had not anticipated. A harsh winter killed 3 head of cattle. Spring floods damaged their southern fence line. Summer brought drought that dried up Miller Creek entirely, forcing them to haul water constantly. But they faced each challenge together, drawing strength from their partnership. Julia learned that marriage was not just romance and dancing. It was Marcus wrapping her blistered hands with bandages without her having to ask. It was working side by side in silence, because they were too tired for conversation, but taking comfort in each other's presence. It was making difficult decisions together about which supplies they could afford and which would have to wait. She also discovered unexpected joys. Marcus reading to her from his mother's Shakespeare in the evenings. The way he always saved her the first cup of coffee in the morning. How he would pull her into an impromptu dance when she was frustrated, humming a tune until she laughed despite herself. By the end of their first year, they made their first loan payment to Mr. Peterson right on time. It was not easy and they had to scrimp and save to make it happen, but they did it. Julia felt a fierce pride as she handed over the money. "You two are going to make it," Mr. Peterson said with satisfaction. "I can tell. You have got what it takes." As winter settled in again, Julia realized her monthly courses were late. At first, she attributed it to stress and hard work, but when 2 months passed with no sign of bleeding, she could no longer deny the truth. She was pregnant. She told Marcus one evening after dinner, "I have news. We are going to have a baby." Marcus froze, a dish towel in his hands. "A baby, due in the summer, I think, maybe July or August." Julia watched his face anxiously, unsure how he would react. They had not discussed children, too focused on survival to think that far ahead. But Marcus's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "A baby, we are having a baby. Julia, that is incredible." Relief flooded through her. "You are happy about it." "Happy does not begin to cover it," Marcus said, kissing her soundly. "We are starting a family, building something that will last beyond us. How could I be anything but thrilled?" The pregnancy was not easy. Julia kept working as long as she could, but by her 6th month, even Marcus had to admit she needed to slow down. He took on more of the physical labor while Julia managed the household and handled the business aspects of the ranch. She hated feeling useless, but Marcus was patient with her frustration. "Growing a baby is work too," he reminded her when she complained about not pulling her weight. "You are doing the most important job right now." Their son was born on a sweltering August afternoon in 1879. The local midwife, Mrs. Campbell, assisted while Marcus paced anxiously outside. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst through the door despite the midwife's protests that he should wait. "Is she all right? Is the baby all right?" Marcus demanded. "Both fine, Mrs. Campbell said with a smile. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Irving." Marcus approached the bed where Julia lay exhausted but radiant, holding a red-faced bundle. "A son," he breathed in wonder. "We have a son," Julia confirmed, shifting the baby so Marcus could see him better. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything. Now, looking at his tiny son, Marcus said quietly, "What about Thomas? After your father. He should know where he came from, who built the foundation we are standing on." Julia's eyes filled with tears. "Thomas Irving. That is perfect." Motherhood transformed Julia in ways she had not expected. She had always been fierce and independent, but now she discovered a protective ferocity that surprised even her. She was determined that her son would grow up on land his parents owned, would have opportunities she and Marcus had fought for. Marcus proved to be a devoted father. He would walk the floor with Thomas at night when the baby was fussy, singing old songs his mother had taught him. As Thomas grew into a toddler, Marcus would take him on gentle rides around the property, teaching him about the land and animals with infinite patience. The years passed in a blur of work and growth. Thomas learned to walk, then to ride, then to help with simple ranch chores. Julia and Marcus continued making their loan payments to Mr. Peterson, never missing one despite droughts, harsh winters, and fluctuating cattle prices. In 1882, Julia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah. 2 years later, another son arrived whom they named William. The ranch house that had once seemed too large for one lonely woman now rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Julia sometimes thought back to the woman she had been before Marcus, standing alone at the edge of the dance hall, convinced no one would ever want her. That woman felt like a stranger now. Marriage and motherhood had not made her soft exactly, but they had given her a different kind of strength. She was still capable and fierce, but now she had people she was fighting for beyond just herself. The town's attitude toward her changed too. Women who had whispered about her now sought her advice about managing household budgets and dealing with difficult seasons. Young couples just starting out asked Marcus and Julia how they made their partnership work so well. The woman no one had wanted to dance with had become someone people respected and admired. In 1885, 7 years after their wedding, Julia and Marcus made their final payment to Mr. Peterson. They owned both ranches free and clear. Mr. Peterson, now in his 70s, insisted on celebrating with them. "Your father would be proud," he told Julia as they signed the final papers. "You took land that was barely surviving and turned it into something prosperous. You did that through hard work and determination, and by finding the right partner." That night, Julia and Marcus stood on their porch watching the sunset over land that was truly, completely theirs. Thomas, now 6, was playing with Sarah and William in the yard, their shouts and giggles carrying on the evening air. "Do you ever think about that first night we met?" Marcus asked, his arm around Julia's waist. "When you ran out of the dance hall and I followed you." "All the time," Julia admitted. "I think about how close I came to never knowing you. If I had left just a few minutes earlier or later, if you had not been outside at that exact moment, our whole lives would be different." "I would have found you eventually," Marcus said with conviction. "Once I saw you that night, I knew you were important. I did not understand it yet, but I knew. Some things are just meant to be." Julia leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she said simply. "I do not say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head. "Every day, I thank God you said yes to that dance. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Julia Irving." As the years continued to pass, the Irving Ranch became known as one of the most successful operations in northern Nevada. Marcus and Julia's reputation for fairness and hard work attracted good hired hands who stayed season after season. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Sarah showed a talent for horse training that amazed everyone. William had his mother's head for numbers and helped manage the ranch accounts even as a young boy. But success did not come without challenges. In 1887, a harsh winter decimated cattle operations across Nevada. Many ranchers lost everything. The Irvings lost 30 head of cattle, a significant blow but not a fatal one because of their careful management and savings over the years. They helped their neighbors where they could, offering loans and assistance to families facing ruin. Marcus remembered being the one with nothing, and he never forgot what a lifeline kindness could be. "We have enough," he told Julia when she worried about their own finances. "If we can help others survive, we should. That is what community means." In 1890, Mr. Peterson passed away peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was well attended, and Julia wept as they lowered him into the ground. He had been more than a neighbor. He had been the link to her father, a guardian and friend when she needed one most. "He gave us our start," she told Marcus as they walked home from the cemetery. "None of this would exist without his faith in us." "Then we honor him by doing what he did," Marcus said. "By helping the next generation the way he helped us." True to that promise, Marcus and Julia began offering fair-priced leases to young ranchers just starting out. They hired young cowboys and taught them proper ranching techniques. Julia started teaching some of the local women how to manage ranch finances and business dealings, skills most women were never offered the chance to learn. The Winnemucca Town Social still happened every summer, and the Irvings always attended as a family. Julia watched her children dance and laugh, watched Thomas shyly ask a girl to waltz, watched Sarah spin with abandon to the fiddle music, and she always saved at least one dance for Marcus. "Still the best dancer in Winnemucca," Marcus would say as he swept her across the floor. "Still the only one who ever asked," Julia would reply. "The only one smart enough to ask," Marcus corrected. "Every other cowboy in this territory missed their chance and they know it. You are still the bride they all envy me for." It was true. Even after years of marriage, people still talked about Marcus and Julia Irving with a mix of admiration and wonder. How the woman no man wanted had become the heart of one of the strongest partnerships anyone had seen. How the lonely cowboy from Kansas had built an empire with her. In 1895, as the century drew toward its close, Julia turned 40. Marcus threw her a birthday celebration at the ranch, inviting friends and neighbors from across the territory. As she looked around at the gathering, at the life they had built, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Thomas was 17 now, already managing significant portions of the ranch. Sarah, at 13, was training horses for sale to neighboring ranches. William, at 11, kept books that would make a professional accountant proud. And there were two new additions, twin daughters born the year before, Emma and Grace, who toddled around underfoot bringing chaos and joy in equal measure. 5 children, Julia said to Marcus as they watched the party. "When did we become the kind of people who have 5 children?" "When we became the kind of people who had enough love to share," Marcus replied. "When we built something stable enough to support a family. Your father's ranch that was barely surviving is now home to 7 people and provides employment for 6 hired hands. That is not nothing, Julia. That is everything." That night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Marcus and Julia sat together in the parlor of their expanded house. It was a far cry from the simple cabin Julia had lived in alone all those years ago. They had added rooms as the family grew, built a proper barn and bunkhouse for the hired men, installed windows that let in light and air. "You ever miss it?" Marcus asked. "The simplicity of before, when it was just you and the land?" Julia considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "I survived then. I was proud of my survival. But this, what we have now, this is living. I would not trade it for anything. Not even for a life where you did not have to work so hard, where you could have been a town lady with clean hands and pretty dresses." Julia laughed. "Especially not that. I like my calloused hands. They are proof of what I have built. and I have pretty dresses for when I want them, but I prefer my work clothes. This is who I am, Marcus. This land, this work, this family. You did not try to change me. You joined me as I was and helped me become even more myself. That is the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." Marcus pulled her close. "You gave me the same gift. I was drifting when I came to Nevada, working for wages, no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me a reason to build something permanent. You gave me a home." They sat together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from 17 years of marriage, of truly knowing another person. Outside, the Nevada night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The sounds and smells of the ranch, the place they had built together, surrounded them. As the new century approached, the Irvings continued to thrive. Ranching was changing. The wild frontier was becoming more settled, more civilized. Railroads brought easier access to markets. Telegraph lines connected even remote areas. The rough and tumble days of the 1870s felt like ancient history, but some things remained constant. The land still demanded hard work and respect. Cattle still needed tending. Fences still needed mending. And the Irving family still met each challenge together. In 1899, Thomas married a local girl named Catherine, and they built a house on the eastern section of the ranch. Julia watched her son start his own family with pride and a touch of melancholy. Time moved relentlessly forward. "We are getting old," she told Marcus one morning as they rode out to check the cattle. They were both in their mid-40s now, their hair showing silver, their faces lined from years under the sun. "We are getting experienced," Marcus corrected, "and we have earned every gray hair and wrinkle. They are badges of honor." Sarah announced her engagement in 1900 to a young horse trainer from California who appreciated her skills and independence. Julia helped her daughter plan a wedding, thinking of her own simple ceremony all those years ago. "Were you nervous?" Sarah asked as they sewed her wedding dress together. "When you married father, terrified," Julia admitted. "Not of him, but of how much I wanted it to work. I had convinced myself I did not need anyone, and then suddenly I needed him more than air. It was frightening to be that vulnerable." "But it worked out," Sarah said softly. "It did, because we both chose it every day. Marriage is not just the wedding, sweetheart. It is every morning when you wake up and decide to be partners again. Some days that is easy, some days it is hard. But if you both keep choosing each other, keep choosing to work together instead of against each other, you can build something beautiful." Sarah's wedding was a grand affair, bigger than Julia's had been. The whole territory seemed to turn out to celebrate. Julia danced with Marcus at the reception, and they laughed at how much had changed since their own wedding day. "Still got my best girl," Marcus said as they waltzed. "Still got my best man," Julia replied. William left for college in San Francisco in 1901, the first member of the family to pursue formal higher education. He promised to return and bring modern business practices to the ranch. Julia was proud even as she worried about him in the big city. The twins, Emma and Grace, grew into lively 10-year-olds who ran wild across the ranch, as comfortable on horseback as on foot. Julia watched them and saw echoes of herself as a young girl, before the world taught her that women were supposed to be delicate and decorative. "Let them be wild while they can," Marcus said when Julia worried about making them more ladylike. "Time enough for the world to put constraints on them. For now, let them know freedom." In 1905, as Julia approached 50, she and Marcus celebrated their 27th wedding anniversary. They had long since paid off all debts and built the Irving Ranch into one of the most respected operations in Nevada. Their children and grandchildren, Thomas now had 3 children of his own, ensured the legacy would continue. At the anniversary celebration, held at the ranch with family and friends, Julia stood to make a toast. 27 years ago, I was a woman no man would dance with. I stood alone at every social, convinced I was unmarriageable and unlovable. Then this stubborn cowboy decided to prove me wrong. Marcus, you did not just give me a dance. You gave me a life beyond anything I imagined possible. You gave me partnership, family, purpose, and joy. Every day with you has been an adventure, even the hard days. Especially the hard days because we faced them together. I love you more today than I did 27 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Marcus rose and pulled her into his arms, kissing her soundly while their children groaned and laughed. I am the luckiest man in Nevada, he declared. I married the strongest, smartest, most beautiful woman in the territory. I built an empire with her. I raised 5 incredible children with her, and I get to keep dancing with her for the rest of my life. I am the envy of every cowboy who ever met her, and I will be until the day I die. The party continued late into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Julia watched her family and friends celebrating and felt a deep sense of peace. This was what success looked like. Not wealth, though they had achieved financial stability. Not status, though they were respected. Success was being surrounded by people you loved who loved you back. It was building something that would outlast you. It was partnership and purpose and joy. As the years continued, Julia and Marcus gradually stepped back from daily ranch operations, letting Thomas and his family take over primary management. They remained involved and active, still rode out to check cattle and mend fences, but the frantic pace of their younger years eased. They spent more time together, just the two of them. Long rides through their land, quiet evenings on the porch, reading together by lamplight. After decades of hard work and child-rearing, they rediscovered the simple pleasure of each other's company. You know what I love about being old with you? Marcus asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset. What? Julia leaned her head on his shoulder. We do not have to prove anything anymore. We built what we set out to build, raised our children, paid our debts. Now we just get to be together without all the pressure of survival hanging over us. We earned this peace. Julia thought about that. They had earned it. Through backbreaking work, through drought and flood and economic hardship, through 5 pregnancies and childbirth, through all the 1,000 challenges of ranching and marriage and life. They had earned the right to sit quietly together and simply be. In 1910, they celebrated their 32nd anniversary with just their immediate family. Julia was 55, Marcus was 59. Their hair was fully silver now, their bodies marked by decades of hard labor. But they still danced together, moving slowly to music only they could hear. Still the best dancer in Nevada, Julia murmured as they swayed. Still the only one smart enough to ask, Marcus replied with a smile. Tragedy struck in 1911 when a winter storm caught Marcus out checking cattle. He developed pneumonia, the same illness that had killed Julia's father. For 2 weeks, he battled the infection while Julia sat by his bedside, holding his hand and refusing to let him go. You cannot leave me, she told him fiercely. We have a deal. We grow old together. You do not get to break it now. Marcus, weak but determined, fought his way back to health. It took months of recovery, but by spring, he was riding again, though with less stamina than before. The illness had aged him, reminded them both that their time was finite. We should make the most of what we have left, Marcus said as he regained his strength. Travel, maybe. See some of the world beyond Nevada. We have earned it. But before they could make plans, the twins announced they were both engaged. Emma to a rancher from Oregon, Grace to a lawyer from Reno. The next year was consumed with planning 2 weddings and all the joy and chaos that entailed. Julia did not mind. She would rather spend her remaining years surrounded by family than seeing distant places. This ranch, these people, this life they had built was her world. She needed nothing beyond it. By 1915, as Julia approached 60, she and Marcus had 11 grandchildren with more on the way. The ranch house was always full of noise and activity. Young voices calling, boots stomping, doors slamming. It was beautiful chaos. They had survived into a new century, seen the wild frontier become settled civilization. Automobiles were becoming common, though the Irvings still preferred horses. The telephone connected them to town. Electricity was coming to even rural areas, but some things never changed. The land still demanded respect and hard work. Cattle still needed tending. And Julia and Marcus still faced each day as partners, still chose each other every morning just as they had for nearly 4 decades. On a warm summer evening in 1918, Julia and Marcus sat together on their porch, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. 40 years had passed since their wedding. They were both in their 60s now, white-haired and weathered but still strong, still devoted to each other. 40 years, Marcus said wonderingly. Feels like no time at all and like forever both at once. Best 40 years of my life, Julia said simply. Every single one of them, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, Marcus agreed. Anyone can be partners when things are easy. We proved we could be partners through anything. That is what I am proudest of. Not the ranch, though I am proud of that. Not our children, though they are incredible. But you and me still together, still choosing each other after all these years. That is my greatest accomplishment. Julia took his hand, feeling the calluses that matched her own, the familiar warmth of his palm against hers. Mine too. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. This land they had worked so hard to build on, this family they had created, this life they had forged together from loneliness and hard work and stubborn determination. It was not perfect. They had faced hardships and heartbreaks, setbacks and struggles. But they had faced them together, and that made all the difference. I would do it all again, Julia said suddenly. Every hard day, every struggle, every moment of fear or pain, I would do it all again to end up right here with you. Marcus pulled her close, kissing her temple. Me too. Every single moment. You are still the woman I want to dance with, Julia Irving. Today, tomorrow, and for whatever time we have left. And you are still the only cowboy I envy anyone for, Julia replied with a smile. The only man who saw past what everyone else thought I was to who I actually am. The only partner I ever needed or wanted. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared, they remained on the porch, holding each other in the warm Nevada night. The woman no man would dance with, and the cowboy who had seen her worth. Together they had built an empire, raised a family, created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. But more than any of that, they had built a love that sustained them through 4 decades of life's challenges. A love based on respect, partnership, shared work, and unwavering commitment to choosing each other, day after day, year after year. It was not the romance of poetry or novels. It was something better. It was real, tested, proven through time and hardship. It was the kind of love that built civilizations, that turned frontier wilderness into homes and families. And as Julia and Marcus sat together under the vast Nevada sky, surrounded by the life they had created, they knew that they had found something precious. Not just survival, not just success, but true partnership, true love, the kind that lasts. The years that followed brought their share of both joy and sorrow. William returned from San Francisco with a wife and new ideas for modernizing the ranch. Thomas took over as primary manager of operations. The grandchildren grew and started families of their own, ensuring yet another generation would work this land. Marcus's health began to fail as he entered his 70s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for over 7 decades. He struggled to mount his horse some mornings. His breathing was labored after exertion, but he refused to stop working entirely, insisting on remaining involved in ranch decisions and daily operations. "This land kept me alive," he told Julia when she urged him to rest more. "The day I stop working is the day I start dying." Julia understood. She felt the same pull toward the land, the need to remain useful and active. They were slowing down together, their steps less sure, their stamina diminished but still together. In 1922, they celebrated their 44th wedding anniversary with all 5 of their children, 14 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren present. The gathering was enormous, requiring tables set up across the yard. Julia looked at the crowd and marveled that all of this had sprung from one dance, one decision to say yes to possibility. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked, his arm around her waist as they surveyed their family. "That I am grateful," Julia said, "for all of it, even the hard parts. They led us here." Marcus kissed her cheek. "Still my best girl." "Still your only girl," Julia corrected with a laugh. "The only one I ever wanted," Marcus agreed. In the spring of 1924, Marcus Irving passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. Julia woke to find him cold beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still reaching toward her across the bed. The grief was crushing, overwhelming, a physical pain in her chest that made breathing difficult. For over 45 years, Marcus had been her partner in everything. Her first thought in the morning, her last thought at night. The person she shared every success and failure with. Half of her soul. And now he was gone. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from across Nevada and beyond. Cowboys Marcus had hired and trained. Families they had helped through hard times. Business partners and friends and neighbors. Person after person told Julia what Marcus had meant to them, how his fairness and kindness had changed their lives. But it was Thomas who understood what Julia had lost. "He was not just your husband," her son said as they stood by the grave. "He was your partner, the person who saw you when no one else did. I know no words can help, but I want you to know that what you and Father built together, the example you set, shaped all of us. We are who we are because of the love you showed us through your partnership." Julia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She had spent so many years being strong, being capable, being the woman who could handle anything. But this was beyond her strength. Losing Marcus felt like losing half of herself. The months after his death were the hardest of Julia's life, harder than the years of struggling alone before she met him. At least then, she had not known what she was missing. Now she knew exactly what partnership felt like, what love felt like, and its absence was a constant ache. She kept working because she did not know what else to do. The ranch still needed tending. Life continued whether she wanted it to or not. Thomas and Catherine were wonderful, taking over most of the physical labor while still consulting Julia on all decisions. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love and support. But every evening, sitting on the porch alone, she felt Marcus's absence like a missing limb. She caught herself turning to tell him something, reaching for his hand, expecting to hear his voice. The silence was deafening. One evening, about 6 months after Marcus's death, Julia sat on the porch watching the sunset and finally let herself remember that first night they met. The dance hall, the whispers, her conviction that she would always be alone. And then Marcus, appearing in the darkness, offering friendship without judgment. "You gave me everything," she said aloud to the empty air. "A life I never dreamed possible. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for 45 years of partnership and love. I miss you every moment, but I would not trade those years for anything. Even knowing how much it would hurt to lose you, I would choose you again. Every time." The wind rustled through the sage, and Julia let herself imagine it was Marcus's response. She was not a fanciful woman, did not believe in ghosts or spirits. But in that moment, she felt his presence, his approval, his continued love surrounding her. Julia Irving lived another 6 years, staying active and involved with the ranch until the very end. She watched more grandchildren marry, held more great-grandchildren, saw the ranch continue to prosper under Thomas's management. She never remarried. How could she, when she had already experienced the perfect partnership on a warm summer evening in June 1930, at the age of 75? Julia sat on her porch watching the sunset one last time. Her children were visiting, the house full of family and laughter. She felt tired but content, ready to rest. As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in the same golds and crimsons she had watched for over 7 decades, Julia closed her eyes and thought of Marcus, waiting for her, ready to dance again. "I am coming," she whispered. "Save a dance for me." And with that, Julia Thompson Irving, the woman no man had wanted to dance with, who became the bride every cowboy envied Marcus for, took her last breath and went to join her partner in whatever came next. The Irving ranch continued to thrive through generations. Thomas and his descendants maintained the land with the same care and respect Julia and Marcus had shown. The story of how their great-great-grandparents met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. The woman everyone dismissed, and the cowboy who saw her worth. The partnership built on respect and hard work. The love that transformed a struggling ranch into a thriving legacy. The dance that changed everything. In Winnemucca, Nevada, people still talked about Marcus and Julia Irving decades after their deaths. About the couple who proved that true love was not about beauty or refinement, but about seeing each other clearly and choosing partnership every single day. About how the loneliest woman in town found the greatest love because one man was brave enough to ask her to dance. Their graves sat side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they built together, the land they loved. Even in death, they remained partners, their story a testament to what was possible when two people truly saw each other and built a life together based on mutual respect, hard work, and unwavering commitment. The woman no man would dance with became the bride every cowboy envied him for. And together, they created something that lasted far beyond their own lives. A love story for the ages set against the harsh beauty of the Nevada frontier. A reminder that the best romances are not built on grand gestures or easy passion, but on the daily choice to be partners through everything life brings. Through drought and flood, success and failure, youth and age, they chose each other. And that choice made all the difference.